Hello my loves, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be sharing my favorite books that I read in 2023. 2023 was a super successful reading year. I read 56 books. However, I will say that I ended up actually reading a lot of short stories this year. I don't know if it was just because Kindle was promoting a lot of original short stories there, and also it's just a great way to feel productive and to, be able to finish a book in one sitting. I think that really inspires me to keep reading when I'm in a slump, is to just read a short story, because they're generally quite engaging and they just capture your attention because obviously they're not that long. So I'm not going to talk about any of those today just because I want to talk more about the longer books that I read, the actual full stories that I read, both fiction and nonfiction. But if you'd like a whole nother video talking about my favorite short stories, I would love to create that, because man, there were a lot that I rated 5 stars and also 4 stars, so definitely some worth checking out. First, I want to get into my honorable mention, which I just have one this year, and it's Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. I'm sure you guys have heard about Brene Brown. She has done so many different books talking about really important skills that I think we need to have, especially as women. I think she talks kind of to women, for women. This book in particular is all about vulnerability, actually. You would think from the title, Daring Greatly, that it's all about taking action, but actually it's about being vulnerable. And what I loved about this book was Brene Brown's kind of opinion on guilt and shame, and how it can be quite healing to be able to share our pain with others. And I also love that she says that people need to earn that right. Not everyone deserves our vulnerability, our darkness, and we should really only reserve that for those who have earned that right. This book talks about so much in terms of just how to be a better partner, how to be a better parent, how to be a better teacher, a better lover, a better friend. Okay, now let's get into my favorites. So my first favorite book of 2023 was the Almanack of Naval, Ravikant. This book was just absolutely extraordinary. Like I said, it's really hard for a nonfiction book to get a 5 stars for me, just because I've read so many, so they really need to blow me away. But Naval's mind is just a place that I want to explore. He is just so wise. He's someone that just somehow is able to manage wealth and happiness and philosophy and just really describe the meaning of life in such a profound way. I really love his truths. This really is a book that just explores every single avenue of self-help and self-development. So if you're looking for a book that's not necessarily a finance book, it's not really a book on happiness, it's not really a book on relationships, but it just has kind of wisdoms and gems and lessons in all of these areas, then I highly recommend this book. It was amazing, and I would gladly reread it. The next book that I absolutely loved was The Power of Intention by Dr. John Wayne Dyer. I honestly could scrap every other spiritual author and just solely read him. I absolutely love Dr. Wayne Dyer. I feel like every time I read him, I heal a little bit more. I step into my purpose. He really talks about how we can use intentions to create our life. And ever since I read this book, I have been so much more intentional, and I feel really much more attuned to the outcomes of things, rather than just feeling like a victim or like, oh, I guess whatever happens, happens. I go into situations with a certain mindset, with a certain intention, and it really can make the difference between something being fulfilling and joyful versus it being just a pain in the butt. So this book is wonderful for just transforming the way in which you view different circumstances or events or things in your life, and to start actually creating the narrative that you want to tell yourself, creating the story so that you're able to step into situations with strength and with power and with love and with hope, so that you're really able to enter as your best self, instead of just coming into a situation and being like, oh, this isn't gonna be good, you know, and you're already kind of wreaking havoc in your mind. So perfect example of when I used kind of the tools in this book was, I was recently going to a baby shower for my friend, which I hadn't seen her or any of these girls for like, oh my gosh, at least 5 years. And so obviously it was quite an overwhelming feeling before I showed up, because they have all kept in touch with each other, but I haven't really been part of that circle. And so I was just telling myself, this is going to be amazing. It's going to be so fun to connect with everyone. I'm going to feel at peace. There isn't going to be anxiety or any awkward silences. And to be honest, just having that intention transformed the experience for the better. The next book that is on my list is An American Marriage, and this was a novel that just had so many gems surrounding relationships and the turbulations that they endure. The story focuses on a couple that is together when the man is unfortunately incarcerated for a crime that he didn't commit. So the story kind of starts off with how she perceives this guy, and then once he goes to jail, how there's all these judgments being spewed at him, and her having to kind of deal with that at home, and him having a completely separate life in the jail. And as the years pass, obviously their lives kind of go in different directions, and you're able to see how their relationship unfolds. And this book is just all about having difficult conversations. It talks about racism. It talks about relationships between father and daughter, about father and son, relationships between friends, relationships between lovers, relationships between lovers who have grown distant. So there's a lot of conversations that have a lot of tension underneath, and it's just beautiful how all the characters are able to live in their truth, regardless of how hurtful that is. It's just one of those stories that definitely doesn't end off in the way that you would expect. It's not just this happy ending where everything just turns out exactly as one would expect. So that's, I think, one of the reasons that it stood out for me. The next book is actually another nonfiction. I'm surprised at how many nonfiction are on this list. It's The Black Swan, The Impact of the Highly Improbable. This book blew my mind. It just blew my mind in every way possible. To give you a short rundown of this book, it is a very complicated book. It is quite complex in the topics that it tackles, but it's all about improbable situations. It's all about those things that are technically not average, not the norm. So if you look at a bell curve, right, there's an average in the center, like the average height or the average income. But this book discusses the extremes, so the extremes on either end, and it talks about how the extreme becomes more extreme with time. The easiest example I can give is just look at the richest people on earth. If you looked at those numbers 100 years ago, to think that someone would have, $100-200 billion would be unfathomable. But as time goes, extremes actually become more extreme, and in a way the extreme also becomes more likely. And he talks about why this is, and why certain events, the longer that they don't occur, the more likely they are to be extreme when they happen. So he talks about stock market crashes and pandemics and things like that, things that we never saw coming, but how, if we actually just looked at statistics, these things are probable, right? Because they're bound to happen every so many years. They're bound to happen every so often. And so if they haven't happened, we know that something like that is going to happen. That sounded like a mouthful, but basically the premise of the story is that a lot of us kind of are taken back by things that are improbable, but statistics tells us that these things are actually bound to happen at a certain point. So this book will definitely just change the way that you perceive the world, that you perceive certain events, and how you choose to prepare for those. The next book is Just As I Am, a memoir. This memoir was absolutely stunning. It was captivating. It was written just extremely well. I was so enamored by this story about this young girl and her commitment to her dreams in an environment, in a time when racism was extremely prevalent, and just the types of experiences she had to endure as someone who wanted to make it in the entertainment industry, and how she was perceived, and the sacrifices that she had to make in order to live out her destiny. And it will just take you through so many emotions. The amount of quotes that I highlighted in this book were just absolutely staggering. The way that Cicely Tyson writes is just phenomenal. She really is gifted when it comes to storytelling, and her unwavering faith in God during times of doubt, during times of uncertainty, it was just absolutely inspiring. I highly recommend this memoir. It's become one of my favorite memoirs that I've ever read, and I definitely see myself rereading it in the future. The next one, completely different from all the rest, is To Be Taught If Fortunate. So this is a shorter novel. I would say it's about like 150 pages. It's this futuristic sci-fi take. It's about these explorers who are basically out in the universe, and they are simply observing other planets in other galaxies, and it is just such an interesting book, just viewing these space explorers and how dedicated they are to their mission of just simply finding out the truth and expanding their knowledge. And in the same vein, they're receiving communication from Earth, and to witness how drastically the Earth has changed since they've left. It was definitely an amazing book, and it's one that's definitely stuck with me. The next one is a book that I've heard of so many times from so many people, but I was just like, this isn't gonna be my jam. I'm someone who never really had a passion for history. It was always my least favorite subject. I don't watch the news, and so I really didn't think that I would enjoy this book, but let me tell you, I was absolutely passionate about this book, and it is Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. This book is basically a snapshot of human history, all the way from when our species is known to have started to where we are today, and it just shows you the ways in which we've evolved, how societies have changed, you know, going from our tribal days to having a very individualistic society. It is very interesting in terms of just how drastically the world has changed, how drastically our needs have changed, how drastically our worries and fears have changed, you know, from back then being fearful of animals and saber-toothed tigers and, you know, having to survive extreme harsh winters, to now our fears being acing an exam or getting the job, and how all of that has impacted our stress, our bodies, and just society as a whole. So it is one of those books that I really can't give you the summary on because it is so in-depth. He talks about everything from cultures to religions to our health habits and our food, and how all of these things have changed and transformed over decades and centuries. So I highly recommend this book, honestly, for everyone, because even someone like me who really doesn't have an interest in history whatsoever was just completely captivated by this book from start to finish. And it was one of those books where I was definitely highlighting a lot because I learned so much about our history, and I just felt smarter. Like, I felt like I understood the human race a lot better from when before I read it. So I highly recommend this to everyone. The next one is The Spiritual Gems of Islam. I highly recommend this book to anyone, regardless of your religion. It has so many just heart-opening exercises and journal prompts and things that will really allow you to dig deeper into the truth, into what matters, into your values, and it will help you really decipher what you consider to be godly. So many of us have this image of what it means to be godly or religious, and we think it's going to church or praying a certain number of times a day, or, you know, following the religious practices to a T. But what if being religious is being generous, is being kind, is loving others, is, you know, being more selfless? And so this book really just examines that, and it really helped me understand myself better. It helped me understand how I view God and what people in my life inspire me to be more godly, and I just absolutely love this book. It was one of those books that just felt good in my soul. It was so nice. Like, I looked forward to reading it every night, and I would have my journal out, and it is definitely one of those books that you want to actively read and just be doing all the practices and journal prompts and things of that nature. So if that's something that you're interested or called to do, I highly recommend it. Last but not least is Lady Balls: How to Be Savagely Successful in a World Addicted to Suffering. I know that title is a bit of a mouthful and it's a little bit funny, but let me just say that this book is just amazing. It will definitely transform the way that you live, the way that you perceive your own desires. It will make you feel so worthy, so capable, and that you are allowed to have desires. You are allowed to want to reach certain goals or to have certain things. I think that so many people shame you for having big dreams or for having certain aspirations for your life, but this book will definitely make you feel empowered. There's also journal prompts in, I think, every single chapter, and so this book covers everything from mindset to manifestation to wealth to relationships to kind of the different cycles in a woman's life and what we should be focusing on in each and every age. So I really recommend this book to women. I think it should be a must read. It's something that's really going to just fuel you and just let you know that you're not alone, and that if we all come together and really own our dreams and our desires, then we can definitely make them a reality. So those were my favorite books of 2023. I definitely want to hear what you guys read this year and what stood out for you. Did you read any new favorites? I'd love to hear what those are. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, you can watch my favorite book videos from the past few years, which I will link for you guys. I love you so much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all very soon. Mwah.